Shawna Vreeke? That's how you say it, right? Shawna
Yes,
Vreeke, welcome to MyFlora Fridays. It's so good to see your smiling face again. I think it's been probably a year since we've seen each other, maybe. Oh,
probably last MJ Unpacked was maybe last time we hung out.
I'm really excited for MJ Unpacked. I always am because there's always a great group of kind of friendly folks and scientists and researchers and cultivators and just all the really cool people that seem to go to the MJ Unpacked. I have invited you onto the MyFlora Fridays because have some really interesting, you have a really interesting background. Your PhD is pretty specialized, and I'll let you talk about that. And then you're working with True Terpenes for a few years now, and they've got some cool stuff going on. But you know you better than I know you, so I would love for you to tell everybody who you are, what you do, and what brought you to the cannabis space.
For sure. Well, thank you for having me on your podcast, Anna. I
Mhm, mhm.
I really love this platform and how you've been hosting. So, yeah, a little bit about myself. I do have a PhD in organic chemistry. The program that I studied with, we looked at electronic cigarettes and the toxins that could be formed within the aerosol and how that affects the end consumer. So in that program, I looked at varying aspects of the electronic cigarette, like the different flavor additives and the device design and the PGVG base, and how when those are heated, what happens chemically and how does that affect the end consumer's health and safety. So that was a really exciting project. The timing was right before the EVALI crisis in 2019, if you're familiar with EVALI. And so that really highlighted how valuable and important and necessary the work that I was doing was for the general consumer and also for regulators. And so I think, for better or worse, the 2019 EVALI crisis really triggered this realization that not everything is going to be safe to inhale. We don't understand what happens when we're applying heat to these materials. And so these ingredients need to undergo a little bit of deeper dive to understand if they're going to be, relatively safe for a consumer to inhale. And so after I got my PhD, that was in 2019, I applied for a position at True Terpenes. And I think True Terpenes saw my application and really saw a lot of potential in what I could do, because the original job that I applied for was not the job that I have been doing. So they were in a really unique position to appreciate the knowledge that I had from my grad school research and how that could really well apply to cannabis vaping, and specifically the ingredients, which True Terpenes is an ingredient manufacturer first and foremost. So then I got this job at True Terpenes and I created the toxicology program. I was probably one of the first handful of people in the cannabis industry that was even looking at toxicology and health and safety of these materials to the end consumer.
Mhm.
And so, in that way, True Terpenes was really advanced in their desire for safety and quality by hiring me and having me create this toxicology program. And then, that led to the 5+ years that I've been here, where I've reviewed all of our ingredients that we use. I also have reviewed other materials that are used in cannabis vaping, and I can, help our clients understand the health and safety of their product. I've been able to communicate with regulators about creating sensible regulations that are supported by science, that actually protect the consumer. I've worked with lobbyists, I've worked with attorneys, all just, educating with the goal in mind of creating products that are really going to protect the end consumer, because even if it's cannabis, like I think every single consumer should be protected no matter what product they're choosing to use and no matter if they're using it medically or recreationally.
I come from the same, area of looking at consumer concerns or questions. And that's how my PhD started, is I was wondering how come you go to one dispensary and get Blue Dream, and you go to a different dispensary and get Blue Dream, and you have two totally different things. I knew nothing about cannabis really at the time, other than it's largely propagated through cloning. So why would the products be different? And then, thinking about all kinds of products that we purchase and consume, like when you buy something, you have an expectation of what it is, and it shouldn't deviate from that too much, whether it be a natural product or a manufactured, product or anything really. You buy a Snickers, you should get a Snickers. You shouldn't get a corn cob. So that's like how my thing started, and then the ball just kept rolling because questions kept coming up, and especially in cannabis, we haven't had the opportunity to really take a a look at it as hard as we should, especially as consumers, for such a for such an a large industry. Like, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry at this point, and there's so many products out there that we just don't know about, don't know really if they're safe, and they're just, like the vape thing. I'm not a huge vape person, whether that be for nicotine or for cannabis. I'm like really behind at times. But there's so many people who vape, like all day, every day. It's different than cigarettes, right? Most people go outside to have a cigarette. With vapes, you can just do it inside, and like nobody cares really. And I feel like that's kind of, I don't know, you probably have some strong feelings, but I feel like that's not great, you know?
Yeah, that can be kind of like the wolves in sheep's clothing because a lot of people ask me when I was in my grad school program, and even now when I tell them what I studied, they ask the $1 million question: is vaping safer than smoking a cigarette? And my answer always is, if you vape in the same way that you smoked, it's going to be safer. But like you said, if you wake up and you vape nonstop, but you didn't do that with cigarettes, then we can't say that it's safer because your exposure is so much higher, your consumption level is so much higher than what it was with cigarettes. So, what I try to tell people is, if you're going to switch from cigarettes to vaping, only vape at the points where you would have smoked a cigarette. Have it be a direct replacement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was a smoker up until COVID. And then I was too scared to go to the gas station to buy cigarettes, so I quit.
Good job.
I haven't had COVID still, like I'm still a
Wow.
novid. So I like that you tell people that, like, have it be a direct substitution. But do you think that people actually do that, or do you find that people are vaping a lot more often than they would smoke cigarettes? Or do you even know?
I think it's so variable.
Hmm.
It's really hard to tell. I do think one benefit about vaping is that it's a lot easier to just have small sessions. So,
Mm-hmm.
when you light a cigarette, you're pretty much going to smoke through that entire cigarette. Where
Mm-hmm.
vaping, how I see people vape in public or, at their homes during an event or party or something, is they'll usually puff on it 3 times and then stop.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot of benefit with vaping over cigarettes. And it's hard to say how people are doing it ad lib, where a lot of research is not looking at like ad lib smoking or vapiers patterns, vaping patterns. They're looking at, okay, we're going to ask you to puff on it 10 times, and then we're going to ask you these questions on how addictive it is, etc. So it's really hard to understand what the general consumers ad lib vaping patterns are.
Mm-hmm.
But the most I can do is just advise, right?
Yeah. So you mentioned the EVALI So what does that stand for? Like, the what do the letters stand for?
EVALI, let's see if I get this right. Electronic vaping associated
Long.
lung injuries.
Okay, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
And you said that was in 2019.
Mhm.
And I am I right in thinking that that was related to the carrier oils, or is that
Yeah,
not correct? Yeah.
that was related to the carrier oils from illicit THC vapes.
Okay, so not nicotine vapes.
Not nicotine vapes, but nicotine vapes are not without their hazards. We still see today young adults showing up in emergency rooms with, pulmonary issues related to nicotine vapes. So
Hmm.
those
Hmm.
are not harmless. We'll start with that. But Avali specifically, the very dramatic, acute response that we saw has been tied to vitamin E acetate from illicit THC vapes.
So if you're gonna buy a vape, is there requirements now to have whatever oil listed on the ingredients, or like what's the regulation surrounding that?
Yeah, so the regulations around additives into cannabis vape is still much in its infancy. Most states do not require an ingredient labeling that shows or describes in details the non-cannabinoid additives.
Mm.
And then a lot of states that have tried or have, written in legislation to regulate these additives, a lot of times they use large umbrella terms like categories. Very few states actually specifically label banned ingredients. And the ones that do label banned ingredients in their legislation do include vitamin E acetate. So that's great. But it's an uneducated consumer is not going to know how to look up the legislation and the policies in their specific state to understand if vitamin E acetate is going to be found in their vapes or not. So that's a point of regulations in the cannabis industry that are really lacking right now. The restrictive nature to where it's actually protecting consumer health, and then or giving the consumers the information for them to make a educated choice. So that's a lot of like what I've done with like the lobbyists and communicating with regulators is to try to educate them on what the actual language of their policy covers, if that is protective enough to protect consumer health, or if it's not actually doing that at all. Yeah, that's something we work a lot on here at True Terpenes.
Okay. Now there are a metric ass ton of vapes out there on the market, whether it be from the regulated market and dispensaries, or now we've got this hemp problem where people are selling THCA, Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 10, THCO, like all kinds of stuff. And a lot of these products are in vapes, right? Do you think that most of these vapes on the market are have safe carrier oils, or is there a considerable or concernable amount of vapes that have vitamin E acetate, or like what's your feels on that?
Yeah, I would say most vapes out on the market don't use carrier oils or diluents anymore.
Okay.
It's just way too risky for these manufacturers and operators to utilize something that has proven to cause harm in the past. And we know cannabis industry is highly scrutinized already. So I would say majority of operators that are selling within these like legal markets are being protective.
So what do they put in the vape then? Is it just a pure concentrate then with no carrier oil or like I don't even like I literally don't know that much about vapes.
Okay, so we'll do like general vape composition.
Vape
So
101.
vape So for the cannabis market, a cannabinoid vape is going to be usually 80 to 90% of the cannabinoid extract. And so you're going to see THC levels, 85%. That's not uncommon in a vape pen. You might see other cannabinoids in there depending on the extraction process. Some extraction processes are more delicate, so you'll maintain a lot more of the variety of what's naturally found in the cannabis plant. And some extraction processes are much more harsher, and they're really only looking to pull out the THC component. So it's just based on consumer choice, operator choice, whatever the manufacturer is choosing to make as a product. So then outside of the cannabinoids, you'll have the terpene additive, and the terpenes can either be added back in from the original cannabis plant. They could be added from another cannabis plant or from a hemp plant that was, distilled or extracted somewhere else, or they could be botanically created terpene blends that are then added in. And that's usually about 5 to 10% of the overall mixture is going to be this like terpene component. And then if you have leftover space in that composition, it might be natural plant and waxes from the extraction process. It could be a diluent, but again, I said that's not that common. And if it is, it's usually less than 5% of the overall composition. So it's mostly the plant extract and terpenes.
And because the plant extracts are oily, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that m- means that you can just use the natural plant extract as to vape on with at
Yes,
around. I don't know what the right word is. I was
exactly.
just
That's the thing is you can get terpenes from all sorts of different materials, right? Terpenes are found in every single plant around the world,
hmm
not just cannabis.
right. So I was having a conversation with Russ Hudson, and we were talking about like botanically derived terpenes versus cannabis derived terpenes. And there's two camps, right? That a terpene is a terpene is a terpene, no matter where you get it from, or cannabis derived terpenes are far superior for cannabis products than any botanically derived terpene. And I'm like, yeah, but I feel like with a cannabis derived terpene, when you take it out of the cannabis plant, there must be something else that comes with that extraction process, and maybe that's what people are picking up on is that cannabis derived terpenes are more cannabisy than something that you got from like a mango or a pine tree or whatever. So, what are your thoughts on this botanically derived versus cannabis derived terpene camps?
Great question. So I think there's a place for both of them, and there's pros and cons for each category. So the botanical derived terpenes, well, first I'll start with where you mentioned the a chemical is a chemical is a chemical. So that is absolutely true when we're distilling it down to the compound molecular level. So if we have D-limonene from a lemon and we have D-limonene from the cannabis plant, it's exactly the same. It's going to behave the same in the vape pen. It's going to behave the same in your body. Your body is not going to know the difference. So molecularly, it doesn't really matter where the compound is coming from. The difference and the preference choice is when you're talking about the overall mixture of compounds. So botanical terpenes are created from isolated compounds from non-cannabis plants. So, here at True Terpenes, we have over 150 different raw ingredients, and those are all isolated compounds from different plants all around the world. And then we create these blends molecule by molecule. So, botanical terpenes, you have the ultimate control of the chemical composition. And that can be really powerful when we're talking about the medical use of cannabis, right? You can ensure consistency lot after lot, year after year with these botanical terpenes. They're really beneficial for operators that sell in multiple different states, and they want to make sure that a product that you buy in California is going to be the same as a product that you buy in New York, for example. And so that's really where botanical terpenes shine. Then on the other side, you have terpenes that are extracted from cannabis, hemp, marijuana, whatever you want to call it. And the benefit of that is you get this very deep, complex aroma from the cannabis plant. And so there's a lot more chemicals and molecules in it because it's a whole mixture.
Mm-hmm.
And so that complexity can really add to the entourage effect, and it can add to the diverse aroma that we know cannabis cultivars have. The con with that is that the cannabis terpenes are reliant on harvest to harvest differentiation. And so you might not be able to obtain that same aroma or the same chemical composition year after year. It's a lot more challenging. And then on top of the fact that they're going to be much more expensive because typically you're growing flower for the cannabinoids that are the active ingredients. So be able to extract the terpenes out and protect these very delicate, volatile compounds, it takes extra knowledge, it takes extra instrumentation, and it's just another process to maintain that, very diverse chemical composition. So they're much more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of just depends on what your goal is. And I think the smartest manufacturers will offer product lines with both botanical and cannabis derived terpenes.
Right. So when people are doing cannabis-derived terpene extracts, they're not actually just extracting that one terpene. So if let's say they have a cannabis-derived D-limonene, there's other stuff in there, is what you're saying.
Yes. Right. Absolutely. It is absolutely possible to isolate out the compound from a cannabis terpene blend, but it's extremely challenging because a lot of the terpenes and terpenoids and esters and right, it's a very diverse group of compounds that exist in cannabis. So all of those are very similar chemically to each other. So it's really challenging to isolate them from each other. For example, alpha pinene and beta pinene, they have the exact same weight, so you can't separate it out by weight. They have the exact same polarity, so you can't separate it out by polarity. It's very challenging to separate that out.
And so you said you have a shit ton of raw ingredients that you extract your terpenes from. Do other plants have the same issue as cannabis does, where you've got multiple terpenes in there, and when you extract them, they kind of come as a bundle deal? Or, or, like if you want to extract, I don't know, myrcene from mangoes or something, or, are there other things that come out of mangoes that give a different taste or smell than another plant that is high in myrcene?
Yes, that is something you have to consider. What's really interesting that you brought up mangoes and myrcene, because that's a great leeway into talking about thiols. So thiols are kind of getting their claim to fame right now in the cannabis space because their aroma is that gassy, skunky note that cannabis and especially old strains are really well known for. And that's all due to the thiols. But what's interesting about the thiols is they're in plants and cannabis at very, very low concentrations. We're talking about parts per billion
Mhm.
level. So if you're extracting, for example, myrcene out of mango, mango naturally has thiols in there. When you get that myrcene out, there still might be enough thiols, even though it's in a parts per billion level, where you'll be able to smell that gassiness with your myrcene. So that's why when you're extracting botanical terpenes, it's really important to choose the correct starting material
Mm,
because we don't want our myrcene to taste or to smell sulfury.
right. That's interesting because I love talking about this. So we were talking about COVID already, but I was reading okay, so the people who lost their smell and taste, there were also people who like they lost most of their smell and taste, but they could everything smelled like garbage, hot trash, vomit, like shit, like all kinds of gross stuff. And I was reading somewhere that because these compounds are detectable in the parts per billion, parts per trillion, even, they lost their sense of smell for things that we can detect in the parts per million. But those
Mhm.
parts per billion and trillion, they could still pick up on, which are those nasty, vomit, poop smells. And I was just like, that's why. That's got to be why, because we can detect them at such low levels,
Yeah,
right?
we're very sensitive to those smells. And, I'm not a sociologist or historian, but you can imagine tracing back to our ancestors had to pick up on those very off-note smells as a safety precaution.
Hmm.
So that's why we can smell it at such low levels. It's very
Right.
interesting.
Like rotting food, rotting meat. You don't want to eat things covered in poop. That's not a great idea.
Exactly. Contaminated food, food that's gone bad, 100%.
Yeah, it's
Which
super
is
interesting.
curious that in cannabis we love that.
Some people don't. So, I tell this story back a long time ago now, probably 20-ish years ago. I had a boyfriend who smoked a lot of pot, like great guy, big pothead. But I really hated the smell of pot. And if Phil came into my house, sometimes he would like bring the pot with him. He would have it in a Ziploc bag in a film canister in his pocket, and I could still fucking smell it. I'm like, get it out of my house. Like, go put that in your car. He's like, how can you smell that? And I'm like, because I can. Like, and I did not like it. And to continue the funny story, when I went to UNC and was doing my PhD in cannabis, he was a dispensary manager. And I walked into his dispensary and he was like, what are you doing here? You don't smoke pot. And I was like, I'm going to do a PhD on cannabis. And he's like, how are you going to do that? You hate the smell of it. I was like, yes, but like this is gonna be real cool. And now I love the smell of it. So I've really turned around on that. But as I was saying, like I really love the terpenes, not to put in vapes or anything like that. I just really like the smell of all of the different types of cannabis and all the different, the chemo diversity, right? It's just incredible for cannabis. And I just think that's a funny story because not everybody likes that smell.
Right,
Some
right.
people love
And
the
that's
smell of skunks or gasoline. My mom loves it. And I'm like, you would love the smell of pot. And she's like, I don't think I would. I'm like, oh, yes, you would.
that's great. Yeah, and it really highlights how important it is to have a wide variety of offerings because everybody's different. Everybody's biology is different. Everyone's preferences are different. Their needs are different. So you have to offer the skunky all the way up to the citrusy and the sweet and the fruity and the earthy. Like you got to have that wide range.
My favorite are the earthy, like woody notes. That's I really like, but I like that stuff in my perfume and my, my so I like the manly scents. The tobacco, the leather, the whiskey.
The
Like
leather, yeah.
those are the ones I really go for. So at True Terpenes, obviously you do botanically derived. Do you do any or cannabis? You do botanically derived. Do you do any cannabis derived, or do you just steer away from that because of the complexity and the difficulty of getting
We
them?
do.
You do?
We do. Yeah, we have a line that is extracted from federally legal hemp, I'll say. So we have that, and then we also have a line of products where we mix the the cannabis hemp derived terpenes with botanical derived terpenes. So you have a blend. And then we also just recently created a product line where it contains a crude extract of the hemp plant that contains CBD and other cannabinoids. And then we mix that back in with the terpenes and add a little bit of botanicals. So that line is our most true to cannabis aroma because we're able to add back those really sensitive, volatile, but high impact aroma compounds that they're really hard to maintain when you're extracting from a plant. So we offset that missing note with our botanicals.
Gotcha. So
Mhm.
what kind of okay, so there's vapes, right? But I'm sure there's like a ton of things that people buy terpenes for. I remember I went to the conference that I went to and they had little terpene kits or whatever where you could smell the different, which I thought was really cool. But they had like a USB like thing, and it had terpenes in it, so you could plug it into your computer, and then you'd get all these like it was like an air freshener, which I thought was pretty cool. But like outside of vapes, like what kinds of stuff do people use terpenes for? And I'm sure it's not just in the cannabis industry, right? There's other industries that would use terpenes too.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. Essential oils are, for better or worse, essentially terpene blends. So anything that you would use essential oil for, aromatherapy, diffusers, etc., you can use the terpene blends there. We also have some customers that add terpenes into candles, so the
Mhm.
candles smell nice. We have clients that add terpenes into gummies for the cannabis space, pre-rolls in the cannabis space, tinctures are I think are going to really increase a lot, especially as we see federal rescheduling, because tinctures is a really efficient way to consistently deliver medicine to patients, and being able to add those terpenes into the tincture will increase their effectiveness, and you can control the chemical composition really well for consistency for your medication. So I think that category is going to increase a lot. And then more outside of cannabis, we actually had a client that was buying a large volume of an individual isolate, and he was using it on a golf course as like a bug spray of
Like
sorts.
a pest deterrent.
Yeah, like a pest
Okay.
deterrent. And that's, if you think about why the plant even makes terpenes, I'm sure you know this better than I, it's to attract and deter
Mm-hmm.
bugs, right?
Mm-hmm. And it can even go further than that. So, like, if a plant is being munched on, which is essentially what you're doing when you cut your grass, you're sending a signal to the grass that something is eating the shit out of you. And that smell of freshly cut grass is the smell of your grass screaming,
Oh my
right?
God.
But some of these terpenes, they not only signal to other plants around, hey, there's a predator around, like upregulate your, defenses, but also some of these terpenes and chemical signals can, like birds and other predatory things can pick up on. So if you've got like a caterpillar munching on you, the plant releases a chemical, the bird goes, I can smell caterpillars munching on, and they'll go and they'll eat the caterpillar. So it's like the plant is
Wow.
so smart to be able to do that. plants don't have brains, but they have the incredible ability to do all kinds of crazy things that they can't move. So they got to be able to do something. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any plants.
That's really cool.
Russ talks about that a lot in his education and about terpenes and whatnots. Okay, so terpenes, right? They're in a whole lot of different products. I think of Pine Sol, like the cleaning products,
Mhm.
Citrusol, which is just oily citrus oil that will remove like Sharpie's marker and it'll take your nail polish off. And I think of what terpenes can do, like that. Like they're pretty caustic and they can cause skin irritation and everything. That's your outdoor skin, the stuff that's supposed to be protective. Like, what does it do? Well, I always think about like, oh my God, and people are inhaling that.
Yeah.
Like, what is that doing to people's lungs? I know that they're naturally in all kinds of stuff, but we don't really smoke mangoes or pine trees. We're smoking cannabis, and that's fine. There's a certain level of terpenes naturally found in the plant, but like I feel like some of these companies are putting an irresponsible amount of terpenes into their products that could be really damaging to your lungs if you're inhaling that. And also, what the hell do these terpenes turn into when you light them on fire? When you apply heat, chemical reactions happen, chemical changes happen. What happens to these terpenes, or do we even know? Like, what's being produced when we light something on fire and then inhale it? And yeah, these
Yes,
are the things that keep me up at night.
I can tell. All right, let me try to put your mind to rest a little bit. So, you brought up a really great topic on the theory of toxicology. So, I mentioned toxicology earlier. Let's talk about the theory to understand. So, toxicology is a really fundamental science to understand risk of a compound. And risk is a combination of the inherent toxicity of that compound multiplied with the exposure level. So you can't understand risk without both of those pieces. So the caustic nature of terpenes, like you mentioned, that's the inherent risk of that exact compound. And that's true. Some terpenes are very caustic. Some terpenes are actually flammable. And you're going, oh my God, I'm inhaling flammable material, but we have to remember that exposure piece is so important when we're talking about risk. So the idea is, everything can really cause harm. Even drinking water can cause death, right? So we know that we actually have to drink water every day, and I do drink water every day, and I'm not dying, right? So what's going on there? That's the exposure part. So, a large part of what I do is called risk assessment. And so I take the inherent risk of the compound, and I look for studies that have tested that compound at different exposure levels. And I find the exposure level where they did not see any risk at all. And so that's the level that I use to define the maximum usage limits that like as a percentage of our overall blend. And that limit, we can't include that exact compound above that limit. And this is should be familiar in cannabis if you think about the regulated contaminants limits, right? So in the cannabis industry, we know we have to test products for residual solvents, pesticides, microbials, heavy metals, etc. And they have a set action limit. And so if your material tests above that action limit, we say, we don't think that's safe. You can't sell it. You have to remediate it. You have to somehow lower the limit or you have to destroy it, right? So at True Terpenes, I'm setting the same kind of limits for each individual ingredient. And that is based on this risk profile. So below that exposure limit, we can be confident that it's not going to cause harm to the consumer. So that's really, really important. And you're absolutely right. When manufacturers are creating these vape pens, or if they're infusing their pre rolls with exogenous materials, they need to make sure that they're not adding too much. They're not adding a limit to where we are going to start seeing harm and risk does increase. So it's kind of like a song and dance of like, make sure you don't do too much, but you need to add enough to get the desired effect that your consumers are expecting.
I've seen some COAs where I'm just like, I don't know, man. That seems like a lot of terpenes. And I'm sure that some are worse than others. You were saying some of them are caustic, some of them are flammable, some of them
Mhm.
are just, whatever. And like,
Yeah. When you look at the action limits that I've set here, they range widely. We have some action limits where it's like 300%. Obviously, it's not possible to put 300% of something, but it's the safety profile is so high that I'm like, yeah, you could, vape this 3 times what we think people are vaping. And then I have limits so low that we're at like 0.01%. So it's really broad range based on the inherent risk of that individual compound.
okay. All right, I have a really off the wall question that I don't know if you're going to be able to answer or not, but I'm
Okay.
just going to throw it out in case you do. So I've heard stories, and you were talking about candles, right? It makes sense that you would put terpenes into a smelly candle because smelly candles smell good and terpenes smell good. But I've heard stories about like animals getting sick, particularly cats, um, from being around scented candles, like somebody who either like is constantly burning scented candles or has like, the plug-in wall dealy bobs that do the essential oils and stuff like that. Like, what is it about cats? Do they have like a different respiratory tract, or like why do cats get sick from that stuff?
Oh gosh, I don't know exactly, but I mean, we do know that there's specific plants that are toxic to cats, toxic to dogs, toxic to both. Like some of your really common house plants are really toxic to your animals. So you
Mm,
have to be careful, make sure they're out of reach. And, terpenes are found in plants. So
mm,
it's not a surprise that these materials may be toxic to your cat, may be toxic to your dog.
mm.
I don't know enough information on that. And the catch 22 is in order to gather that information, we need to do a lab study with that specific animal, and then we're intentionally causing harm to that animal. So
Yeah.
you have to ask yourself, how valuable is it to obtain this data? Or
Or
can we
gather the information from the peoples who have pets that have been harmed and find out what was in that candle, what were in those products that made their pet
Mhm.
sick.
Exactly. So a lot of consumer products are are regulated on a more of a reactive response, right? If we've seen a problem, then we'll reformulate. Then we've gathered that information, instead of testing all these different animals with thousands of different materials, you have to ask yourself, is that ethical? And in fact, the FDA, the EPA, a lot of these regulatory bodies are pushing researchers to limit animal testing and to create like cell studies or other modeling studies that can be used in research instead of having to test in a rat and a mice and a dog.
Mm. Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that because I hate animal testing. Hence plant studies.
Yeah.
I did start out, I did my first little 5-year stint at university, which I didn't graduate from. I was animal anatomy and physiology, thinking I was going to be a vet at CSU, one of the largest vet schools in the country. Of course, I wasn't getting into that vet school because I was not a good student. But, then I thought about it and learned about what being a vet entails. Like I had to take some dissection classes, and so nope, not doing that. So then I switched to cellular and molecular biology for my next round at university. And then ended up in a plant lab, and I was like, this is much better. Like I had some friends that were doing like virology studies and working with hamsters and prefrontal cortex studies, and she would have to kill mice, and I'm just like, I'm so glad that I don't have to do that. It's just heartbreaking to me. I'm definitely an animal lover, and so plants are my jam. It's not that I love plants, it's that I love animals.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And right, we can't remove all animal studies, but we can choose, the value, right? How
Hmm.
important is it to test this blush on an animal, right? Like, is blush going to kill people? No, blush is not going to kill people. So maybe we don't have to test on an animal.
Maybe we could test it on pedophiles.
Go to Pedo Island and make that a
Yeah, like
testing
that's
center.
that's part of your sentence is we get to test stuff on you. Not stuff that we know is going to be harmful, but stuff that we're like, okay, well, we want to release it. We'll just do a little test on the pedos.
Right. I
Just
don't know,
in case.
you might have changed the future of science.
Oh, don't touch kids. It's not nice. All right, I have another off the wall question, which I know you can totally answer. Does your
Okay.
office smell?
Does our office smell? I unfortunately it doesn't because we have such a good like HVAC system, and that's for the safety of our employees. So our
You're
HVAC
breathing in
system, because doing that all
exposure.
day, every day, right? Your exposure is really high if you're working in that environment. So we have a super efficient air circulation system in our facility, and so it doesn't smell like our terpenes in the office. If you go into the manufacturing site or the manufacturing room, it does smell more because they're opening and closing the bottles. But again, that air is circulating so fast that it does clear out pretty quickly.
Man, that's disappointing. I was so hoping that your office smelled like, I don't know, wedding cake or banana kush or something.
Right. And coming as an organic chemist, it's really exciting because organic chemistry, we're used to using pretty toxic compounds that you would never want to smell. Like everything I did, I had to work in a fume hood in grad school. And so then coming to True Terpenes, and I'm like, oh, all the materials smell great. I could smell them. This is awesome.
You have to reteach yourself. Smell this. No. Oh yeah. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
That's so funny. I still remember my favorite organic chemistry lab was the one where we got to make the esters and we got to make the banana ester.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's my favorite. I don't like bananas, but I think I would have liked the Gross Michael bananas, which we don't have anymore, and they tasted like the artificial banana that we have now. I
Yeah,
don't
like
like
the lunch
Cavendish bananas.
banana.
Banana flavored anything. I will buy anything that says it's banana flavored. I will eat anything, drink anything, smoke anything, but jam. I'm
Yeah.
obsessed.
So fun fact, that's isoamyl acetate. And they actually use that compound when they're doing fit tests for respirators. So like when OSHA comes in and does your fit test, they release that banana smell, that isoamyl acetate, to test if you have a full seal. So that's how safe that compound is, which is great.
I
Banana,
love
eat banana, smell banana all day.
it. That's awesome. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, fun fact.
Do you have a favorite terpene?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I have a favorite terpene for effects and then for aroma. So my favorite terpene for effects is eucalyptol. It smells nice, it's minty, it's from eucalyptus, but many studies have shown that it can actually repair damage in your lungs. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. When I had COVID, I actually put a drop of eucalyptol in my face mask and would breathe it in, and that helped clear my lungs out.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
pretty smart. Oh,
And then I
you
think,
could all for your
yeah,
lungs.
yes. And then my favorite terpene for smell is alpha philandrine. It's a very floral, sweet aroma.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so eucalyptol in so not like in your weed, but just as a terpene in general, right?
I mean, eucalyptus in cannabis.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is in there, but you can also get it isolated because it's really easy to extract it from eucalyptus.
Hmm.
And then you can have it just like in your diffuser or however. I mean, I've heard people just hang eucalyptus in their shower and then the steam from the shower volatilizes the aromatic compounds in the eucalyptus, and then that again helps open your lungs, clear it out. It's pretty cool.
There's a lot of different kinds of eucalyptus. Is it just any kind of eucalyptus trees, or like, does it matter?
I don't know. I haven't looked that into
Yeah.
plant differentiation of eucalyptus.
Well, all right then. Going back to talking about smoking terpenes. So I think isn't most of the studies on terpenes that have been done based on like aromatherapy where you smell it or eat it, not necessarily lighting it on fire and inhaling it. So, is there research that has been done on that? And if so, like, do these compounds change into other compounds when like THCA turns into delta 9 THC, right? We've talked about this before, and if delta 8 is really found in plants or if it isn't, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
like when people talk about THC, we always say THC in cannabis plant, but really what we're talking about is THCA, and it doesn't turn into the thing that gets you high until you actually light it on fire or heat it up and decarb it. So I'm assuming that the same sorts of things happen with these terpene compounds, that they are going to change into something else. So if there's studies, let's say, that have been done on D-limonene, can we really say that, I'm just going to make this up. So D-limonene is been found to give you energy and help you wake up or something like that, like energizing. Can we really like say that about D-limonene in cannabis if we're combusting it and inhaling it?
Yeah. So that is true when you're doing, or when I do a toxicological risk assessment, I try to gather information on its thermal stability and what products will be formed when heat is applied to that material. And every compound is totally different, and it's based on the structure or formation of that compound. Some compounds are going to be very stable when heat is applied, and some compounds are less stable. That is called pyrolysis studies. And luckily, pyrolysis studies were really important probably 60, 70 years ago. So there's a lot of old data on how these compounds degrade when heat is applied, and at what temperature do we start seeing degradation, and what the products are formed, etc. And so you can find that old data, and then understanding chemical reactions, which is where my organic chemistry background really comes in a lot, is I can understand the mechanism of how something will degrade when heat is applied. So then I can understand, is it going to form a toxic molecule, or is it going to form just a couple straight chain alkenes or alkanes that are pretty inert and aren't going to cause harm. So that is a piece of the puzzle that is important to look at. And moral of the story is not every compound is going to degrade when it's heated, or when it's heated in a joint, or when it's heated on the flower, or heated in a vape pen. And a vaporizer device also gets exposed to a lower heat temperature, and so that is going to help maintain that original composition a lot better than, say, flour would, because you're burning it with a flame, so that's going to be a much higher temperature. Another thing we have to keep in mind is that people have been smoking cannabis flower with terpenes in them for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? And we haven't seen really that much adverse events from long-term cannabis use, even smoking, even with those high temperatures.
Mm-hmm.
So that shows us that a lot of these terpenes are pretty thermally stable. Or if they are degrading, they're not degrading into really harmful compounds.
Right. But still, you know, going back to the limonene example, if the studies were done on smelling like aromatherapy or ingesting, and then those studies say limonene does this, can we really translate that to your, like, you know, this cannabis has a lot of limonene in it, so it's going to be like this because that's what the studies say. It's like, but the studies were done on something completely different. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right. But if we look at the degradation pattern of limonene, we can see that over 90% of that limonene is going to be transferred into the smoke.
Okay. So, but there are some other ones, right, that are less stable. I'm trying to think. It's so I'm guessing, and I'm not a chemist, but I'm guessing that the sesquiterpenes are more stable more often than the monoterpenes.
Yes,
Yeah,
but that's a
maybe.
complicated question. So they're less volatile, which means they transfer from a liquid state into a gas state less readily. So, right, these heavier molecule ones are going to stay in the liquid state. They're going to stay on the plant material more so than these lighter, more volatile compounds.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean that these lighter, volatile, more sensitive compounds are sticking around and being exposed to that heat and is degrading, right? When just enough heat is applied, they're going to start volatilizing off. They're going to start becoming a gas. And so they're not going to be like sitting overheating. If that does that kind of make sense? Like as you puff it, the lighter ones are going to pull through first, and so
Hmm.
they're not going to sit around by that, burning ember.
Hmm.
So they are more volatile, but that doesn't mean they're exposed to the same amount of heat as the heavier sesquiterpenes are.
Gotcha. Oh, that makes sense because yeah, it's moving away from the flame as you're breathing it in.
Exactly. Yeah, you shouldn't take your joint and just hold a lighter up to it, right? You should be, inhaling it as you light so that you get that airflow.
Hmm. Hmm. And so, like, what are the terpenes that might change into something else when heat's applied?
Okay, which ones are less? I don't know. Yeah, that's tricky to say because there's so many variables, how are you heating it? What device are you using? What product is it? What's the composition of it? The higher concentration of an ingredient, if you have 5% degradation of that, but you have it at 100 grams, right? That's a lot more grams than if you only had it at 10 grams, right? If like 5% is degrading. So it's really hard to just say, oh, this one's going to degrade. This one's not going to degrade, right? And packaging has a big effect, right? The water activity we know has an effect. If your weed is getting dried out, then you're losing all those volatile um, terpenes. If you have a vape pen and it's just sitting in the car exposed to heat and light, you're going to have chemistry happening before you
Hmm.
even heat that up. But if you don't do that, you're going to be able to maintain the initial chemical composition. So that's why like packaging laws are so important, educating the consumer on where to store your products.
Don't store your weed in a clear jar on the windowsill.
100%. Don't do that.
You'll lose all your stuff.
Yeah, it probably won't taste very good for a long time. It'll probably just turn into CBN and then you'll just go to sleep, right? That's
Maybe.
that's the
I was
old
talking, so this is
rumor.
interesting. I was talking to Ethan Russo, and he said that when your cannabis is old, it does have a higher level of CBN, but it's not the CBN that makes you sleepy. It's the oxidation of the sesquiterpenes.
Oh,
That's
that's
what
interesting.
that's what he says. And I
Yeah,
I know that you've probably worked with him because doesn't he have blends with True Terpenes?
yeah, yeah, that's true. Ethan Russo and I have collaborated many times through True Terpenes. He's a brilliant scientist. I super value his thoughts and opinions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when he said that, I was just like, well, I've never heard that before. But yeah, that's what he says. So I have
Yeah,
no reason not to believe him, but I didn't ask him for any like hardcore data or evidence for that.
yeah, it makes sense. And even in the scientific research, the effects of CBN is highly debated. Some
Hmm.
studies show that CBN does help sleep, and some studies show that CBN did not have, a significant difference on the sleep parameters. So it's kind of up in the air. Is it placebo? It could be, but placebo's actually real, right? If
Yeah,
placebo makes you feel better, ultimately you feel
feel
better.
better.
And that's all that matters.
Right. Yeah, and I heard that like, and this was from a study that somebody mentioned, I think it was Wendy Young that was talking about CBN, that it doesn't necessarily make you sleepy, but when you are asleep, it helps you stay asleep. Like you get a better restful sleep than without it. But yeah, CBN's super interesting. Like a lot of people have a lot of really strong opinions about CBN.
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of people have a lot of strong opinions about a lot of stuff in the cannabis space.
I was gonna say, leave it up to the cannabis space to have strong opinions.
Right? What okay, so what's your strong opinion on what's your favorite strong opinion that you have your hill that you would die on?
Around cannabis or just in
Yeah.
general?
Yeah, no, around cannabis.
My strong opinion right now, I think on a very hot topic is CHS, and I
Mhm.
will die on the hill that it is not related to pesticides.
Good. I'm glad to hear that because I also think that. And we've been having conversations. I talked to Megan Bang yesterday. I talked to Ethan Russo. I talked to Kyle Boyer, who has also done some work with vapes. But yeah, there is there's too much evidence pointing to THC and not to pesticides to
Mhm.
think that CHS would be caused by pesticides.
Yeah. I mean, if it was caused by pesticides, we would see this as an occupational hazard, right? We would see this in workers that are spraying pesticides, maybe in countries that don't have the same regulations on spraying pesticides. And we don't see CHS or CHS like symptoms in any of those populations. So we've been using pesticides for hundreds of years. This would not be a novel experience if it was related to pesticides.
I suppose an argument could be made that those people are not smoking the pesticides. It
But they're
could be,
inhaling it. When you're spraying it, you're air
yeah,
splicing it and you're
yeah.
inhaling it.
But it could change into something else when you smoke it. But it does, but CHS is also triggered, by the lower temperature vapes and stuff like that. And even synthesized cannabinoids can trigger an episode. And Megan was saying in their research, they found that some people who suffer from CHS, even withdrawing, like stopping cannabis use, can trigger a CHS episode. Like, in what world would a pesticide, like, stopping your exposure to a pesticide would make you sick? That's just
Right,
odd. So, yeah,
right. And we know pesticide metabolism and half-life and clearance of the body, they don't stick around for days, weeks, but we
right.
know THC does.
Yep. And so, in your opinion, why? And to be clear, it is rare. CHS is a rare condition. It doesn't happen in everybody. And just because you've been smoking all day, every day for 30 years and you've never experienced CHS, then this conversation is not about you. But there are people who do experience it, and it's very real, very unpleasant, and life-changing for some people, right? And so it was first identified, I want to say in like 2014 in Australia. Some researchers like figured it out in a small population of people who were presenting with these symptoms. We've kind of seen an increase in cases, and kind of to the point where people are getting misdiagnosed because as soon as you go to the hospital vomiting and you mention cannabis, you automatically get a diagnosis of CHS. But it could be food poisoning. It could be, some other cyclical vomiting, something or other. It doesn't necessarily have to do with the cannabis. And also, two things can be true at the same time, right? There could be some cannabis that has some sort of pesticides in it that will make you sick, but that's also not CHS.
Right. Right. I'm not saying pesticides are risk-free. Absolutely not. We should be controlling for pesticides. But I think the symptoms from pesticide toxicity will be different than what CHS.
So what do you think, in your opinion, is causing the rise in real CHS cases?
It's really hard to say. I'm not tapped in with the medical industry or the medical side of cannabis. It could be as simple as there is now a way to, what's the word? In the medical industry, you have to have like a clinical like term to be
Mm-hmm.
able to diagnose someone. It has to be like a known clinical term. But
It has to be
maybe,
in that book.
yeah, right, that book of terms, or else you can only just describe the symptoms. And so maybe CHS only became a clinical term a few years ago. And so without having that universal clinical term, it's really hard to compile all the data
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to see a pattern. And so maybe it was happening 10, 20 years ago, but patients were not forthright with their cannabis use, and doctors were just describing the symptoms. So it's really hard to connect those symptoms to the CHS that we have right now. But now we have the ability for doctors to, actually say this is CHS like symptoms, then it's kind of easier to track that data.
Mm.
It could be as simple as 20 years ago, patients weren't forthright of saying cannabis use, which is not surprising.
Yeah, I think also we've gotten better at growing. We've been selecting for high THC consistently. 20 years ago, the average cannabis flower was like between 4 and 10%. Now it's up around 20. Well, it depends if you believe the labs or not, but we'll say 25%.
Right,
And that's a lot more THC accessibility. Now you can just go to the store and buy it, and not just in legal states. This whole THCA hemp thing, that's freaking weed. Right? That's just regular marijuana. It's not hemp. It's gonna get you high. It's the exact same freaking stuff you've been growing in your backyard or from, your dealer in high school or whatever. Like
right.
it's just weed. So I think accessibility and also the enormous amount of concentrates on the market. Like back in the day, to do concentrates, you had to know how you could take your mom's straightening iron and like press the flour and get the squeezy juice out of it. Or you could get hot knives and do that. You got to have a friend because somebody's got to hold the knives and somebody's, like it's not easy to do, right? But now you can just go to the store, get your concentrates, just get a vape pen and just, be hitting that all day long.
Right.
And so I feel like there multiple places in the industry now, like the accessibility, the high THC products that everybody has so much more access to. You have the opportunity, the capacity, the ability, the affordability to just smash your ECS with THC all day, every day. And no wonder people are getting sick. Like you're
Mhm.
not supposed to do that. Like you said, you can
Right,
die from water. Like I feel like, yeah, just
right. Yeah, I mean, in most states 20 years ago, the only weed you were getting was like brick weed shipped up from whatever country that is who knows how old, was there even
right.
THC in that, or had it all been degraded at that point? I mean, that could totally be a variability. And I remember when I first saw a dab, the first dab I ever saw, that was less than 20 years ago. Right. So these are like very novel products, very novel use cases. Yeah, those are great call outs. That could absolutely be a huge factor.
Yeah, and the price, right? Back when I was my at CSU in the 90s, well, we had brickweed and kindweed, right? And the brickweed came probably from Mexico, and the kindweed came from the Emerald Triangle. And if you were lucky enough to have your dealer have that on hand, that was awesome. But it cost, $50 for an eighth, $100 for a quarter, which weed right now is cheaper than it was in the 90s. I don't understand how that works because back in the 90s, everything was grown outdoors. and with very little overhead, right? And now we're growing it all indoors. We've got all these controls and taxes and blah blah blah. I don't understand how anybody would possibly are like why in the world would weed be that cheap today? Like it should be way more expensive than it is in my mind.
Well, it could have been cheaper, but the risk was so high and it probably had to pass through so many hands that by the time it got to the consumer, the price had, tripled from what it actually cost to grow. And you have to remember when they were growing in the Emerald Belt, when it was, totally underground legacy market, they would have raids come in and destroy all their plants. And so they have to shift that loss
Mhm.
to, the next harvest. So that risk is why I think we saw such high prices.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, the overhead costs of the lighting and the nutrients and the machines that go ping to tell you when stuff is too wet. I don't know. Like there's a lot of costs associated with growing cannabis, taxes, licensing, all that stuff, right? So I just don't understand why people would think that cannabis would be. I hear people like complaining about how expensive it is, and I'm like, bro,
Yeah,
it hasn't
you don't even
freaking
know.
changed. It's still the same price as it always was. Where were you?
Exactly. Where were you?
So, do you have anything else you want to talk about? You got some passions, you got some research. What are you doing?
God, I would say a big passion that I have is to be able to influence regulators. I think the education part of my job is really exciting to me, to be able to influence such a new industry and educate these regulators, policymakers, lobbyists, etc., so that we have policy that, creates safe products, creates consistent products, and, allows consumer access, right? We can't have so restrictive regulations that consumers can only access two product types. We know there's benefits for all the different product types, and so we need to make sure that patients and consumers can access the products that work for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love to hear that there is some actual science informing policy because that's how it's supposed to work, right? And but traditionally, and at least in this country, that's not always the case. It's usually whoever has the money influences the policy.
That is totally true, and that is definitely what's happening right now.
So, like, what research have you got going on? Are you doing any research at the moment, or are you just mixing up terps and talking to policymakers?
Well, right now there's a big push to expand our flavor line here at True Terpenes, expand our botanical line to offer more variety of flavors, stronger flavors, different flavors than what we already have in the catalog. So to do that, our product team has to bring in a lot of new ingredients, and then I have to do the toxicological risk assessment on those new ingredients. So that's a big push. I'll probably be doing that for the first half of this year. And I like doing that. I like reading about new stuff, and like reading scientific journals is really fun for me, and I get to learn about
Nerd.
yeah, I get to nerd out, read about science all day. And so that I really enjoy doing that.
Gotcha. That's cool. Hey, oh, so I have not looked at your products in quite a while. I think it's been probably honestly a couple of years. I think I hit up True Terpenes a while back because the company that I was working with wanted to make basically scratch and sniff stickers for the different strains that they were going to grow and sell, which I thought like it was my idea and I think it's brilliant. However, like the environment can change the chemical profile of any one particular strain that and like we don't have a way to verify what strains are what. So that's kind of a mess right now. But do you guys like formulate blends that mimic specific strains?
Yes, we do. So that's a really good call out for what we call our cultivar line. Our cultivar line is specifically created to mimic the chemical composition and aroma of some of the really popular land races. So the exact ones.
I'm
Oh,
gonna
that
Google
much.
it.
Yeah, Google it for sure.
Granddaddy Purple, OG Kush, New York City Diesel, Joker's Super Lemon Haze, OG Kush Obvi, Donnie Burger. So yeah, you've got like the popular ones. And so I'm assuming that people use these for stuff like vapes. They want it to taste like, a real live strain that they may have experienced in the past or something.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. Does
Mhm.
if somebody wanted to, like if I called you up and said, "Hey, can you make a terpene blend for these 5 strains?" Would you do that?
We do have a whole custom program. So we will make custom blends for some of our clients. You have to hit like minimum volume requirement, but as long as you can hit those minimum volume requirement, we'll make you a custom blend based on whatever you want. Chemical composition, aroma, effects based. We'll tailor it to what you want. And then if you need it exclusive to just your company, we can also do that too.
So Danette Carrion, she owns the Rebecca Finn House here just up the street from me in Tom's River. And she has a custom scent that she has like candles made. She has it pumping through the whole Rebecca Finn House. So it's like the Rebecca Finn House smell. And people have
Yeah.
asked her, like, where did you get this? And she's like, it's a custom scent. You can't have it. But every
Yeah.
now and then she'll have like little candles made. Like if she has a wedding there or something, she'll give those away as like little party favors or whatever. I think that's such a
That's
cool idea.
That's cute. And that's so smart because sensory is the only sense, or smelling, I'll say, smelling is the only sense that connects directly to your brain and connects directly to your memory center in your brain. So when you smell something, it immediately pulls a memory through. That's a subconscious process. And that's the only scent that, like, touch doesn't do that, sound doesn't do that, only smell. So it's super creative and smart of her to gift those away because then people are going to smell it and remember their wedding or that party they had there. And I
Mhm.
mean, that's really good marketing.
Yeah, that's totally true. Like my parents live in Uruguay, and more than once, my son and I have said to each other at various times, "Oh, it smells like Uruguay today." And we know exactly what that means. What does
Uh-huh.
Uruguay smell like? I can't explain it. Anything else you got going on that you want to talk about, tell the folks about?
Um, no, I think that's good. I mean, oh, I can
No.
talk about ASTM.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, so ASTM is a global standards organization. It's all industry volunteer participation,
Mm-hmm.
and ASTM has committees for all different industries, and I'm a part of the cannabis subcommittee.
Mm-hmm.
And so the goal of ASTM is to write standards, and then those standards can be adopted by industry, manufacturers, labs, and then regulators can start adopting the standards within the regulation. They can require a company comply with a specific standard, etc. And we see this in all different industries. For example, shoes, if you work in a restaurant and you have to wear non-slip shoes, the
Mm-hmm.
non-slip is an ASTM standard. So you might see on the shoe ASTM D987-21 or whatever the code is, right? So that shows you that it complies to this standard, and so it would be considered slip proof. So the cannabis subcommittee was created, I believe, in 2017 maybe 2019, within those years. And yeah, so I've been involved with creating standards around the toxicology methodology. And then I'm also working on different standards on restricted substances in vape device material. And then I'm also working on a standard to set limits for pesticides that are based on toxicological endpoints. Because
Hmm.
many of the pesticide limits in the regulated cannabis industry are set based on, farmers limits ability or the instrumentation, level of detection to test these pesticides. And they're not based on an actual risk assessment. They're not based on how the it affects the consumer. And so in ASTM, we're creating this standard where I'm essentially doing the same risk assessment methodology that I do for the flavor ingredients, but we're applying that to the pesticides. And so then these action limits will be based on actual health effects. And then regulators can choose to adopt these limits. They can decide which pesticides they will even regulate for, because if a pesticide has a very high action limit and it's unlikely that it will even reach that limit, then you might not even need to test it at all. So this work could also reduce the demand on manufacturers and analytical labs on how many pesticides they need to test for.
Hmm.
So it's pretty exciting work. I like working with ASTM. It's a bunch of people that are really passionate about the cannabis industry and care about consumers and care about science and cultivation and packaging. And we cover all sorts of stuff. It's really fun.
Well, it's nice to know that they're out there and there's folks working to make things safe and consistent and just for the betterment of our brand new spanking crazy industry that we work in. And I just found out that ASTM doesn't stand for anything. It's just ASTM.
Yeah, it used to stand for something. I think it used to stand for American Standards
Testing methods?
Testing Methods or something like that. But then that was a long time ago and they shifted their focus to really be global.
Hmm.
And so they had to remove that because it wasn't just about American manufacturing anymore. So then it just didn't have any meaning at all. And it's just ASTM International.
ASTM. That's pretty funny. All right. Okay, so I noticed that you're not super active on the social medias. Because trying to find pictures of you is difficult. Like, of course, I have your headshot that is used all over the place. I don't really see you on social media that often, and I know you're on LinkedIn, but you don't show up in the conversations or you don't post very much. Every now and then, if I tag you, you'll jump in with your expert opinion or whatever. If somebody had a question, like if they watch this episode and they're like, I really have a burning question to ask Shawna, where can people find you?
LinkedIn is honestly the best. I do check it pretty occasionally. So if you want to just connect and send me a message on LinkedIn, that's really the best way to contact me.
Okay.
I guess, and I'm a little bit of a lurker.
That's okay. That's kind of like I doom scroll on TikTok like probably at least 3 hours a day, but I don't post that much on TikTok. And I don't know if it's because TikTok has traditionally not been very cannabis friendly. Like, I don't mind sharing my life, but I'd like, to also educate people. And then, like, I just don't understand Instagram. I don't know why I've never really liked Instagram. Again, I'm on there, but like, I don't do much with it. But now LinkedIn is like my go-to. There's just better conversations and, now that I've been in the industry over a decade, like I have a lot of connections and, people that I actually would call friends that I, see at conferences. But yeah, that's where we find most of our cannabis fam is on the LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, I would say like LinkedIn is focused solely on work cannabis industry. And I don't post much because my approach to teaching and leading has always been wait for people to reach out to me. I found that if I just provide my expertise unsolicited, it can get a lot of criticism. People aren't ready to hear it yet, for example. So I kind of just wait. So if someone like makes a comment about a post, then you'll see me, comment back. So that's why I don't like post a lot of like my own stuff. And then other social media, honestly, my side hobby or my second passion, I would say, is dogs. I foster dogs and I really love dog training. So my other social medias are just like animal rescues and dog trainer videos that I just watch and look at dogs all day long. So
Well, you probably saw Dottie. She's very needy. She's my elderly grandma. She's 15.
oh
Yeah,
my god, it's impressive. 15.
she's 15 this year, and she's got only a few teeth left. She's deaf. She just, like she's just an old lady, she walks around, can't hear, so she can't follow commands or anything like that. She just wants food. Um,
Right.
but I don't know if you saw how cute she is. Yeah, we're big animal lovers too. All right, so LinkedIn's the best place to get you. All
Yeah.
right, cool. So Shawna Vreeke, True Terpenes, LinkedIn, got it.
Hmm.
Oh, CHS is not due to pesticides.
Correct.
Right.
I'll dial that
Excellent
down.
conversation. Thank you so much for talking to me. Thank you for your time. I so appreciate you.
Thanks, Anna. I appreciate the invite. It's great
All right.
chatting.
Yeah, you too. All right. I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.